This is Book 5 of John Dryden's translation of the Aeneid. So Dido has just finished her deed, and Aeneas is sailing off into the sea, and the book is going to start with the Trojans sailing back to Sicily, where they are welcomed by a fellow Trojan named Acestes. Next, Aeneas will announce the first annual funeral game for his father Anchises, and the Trojans will honor Anchises' grave. The games will begin with a boat race, and prizes will be given out to the winners. Next, a foot race, and the prizes for it. A boxing match, and prizes for it. And finally, an archery competition, and prizes for it. To cap off the funeral games, the youths will put on a show on horseback, which the Roman audience would know as a Troy game. And this is a wonderful reprieve for the Trojans and for the audience. But, of course, this is the Aeneid, so it won't last. And Iris, sent by Juno, will incite the Trojan women to burn down their own ships while this horseback show is going on. So the women are discovered, and Aeneas is counseled on how to deal with them and the results of their action. The Trojans set to sea once more at the end of the book, and Venus will ask Neptune for safe passage before sleep pays the Trojans a fatal visit. Book 5 of the Aeneid by Virgil, translated by John Dryden. Meantime, the Trojan cuts his watery way, fixed on his voyage through the curling sea. Then, casting back his eyes with dire amaze, sees on the Punic shore the mounting blaze. The cause unknown, yet his presaging mind the fate of Dido from the fire divined. He knew the stormy souls of womankind, what secret springs their eager passions move, how capable of death for injured love. Dire auguries from hence the Trojans draw, till neither fires nor shining shores they saw. Now seas and skies their prospect only bound, an empty space above, a floating field around. But soon the heavens with shadows were o'erspread, a swelling cloud hung hovering o'er their head. Livid it looked, the threatening of a storm, then night and horror ocean's face to form. The pilot Palinurus cried aloud, "What gusts of weather from that gathering cloud my thoughts presage? Ere yet the tempest roars, stand to your tackle, mates, and stretch your oars. Contract your swelling sails, and luff to wind." The frighted crew performed the task assigned. Then to the fearless chief, "Not heaven," said he, "though Jove himself should promise Italy, can stem the torrent of this raging sea. Mark how the shifting winds from west arise, and what collected night involves the skies. Nor can our shaken vessels live at sea, much less against the tempest force their way. 'Tis fate diverts our course, and fate we must obey. Not far from hence, if I observed aright the southing of the stars and polar light, Sicilia lies, whose hospitable shores in safety we may reach with struggling oars." Aeneas then replied, "Too sure I find we strive in vain against the seas and wind. Now shift your sails. What place can please me more than what you promised, the Sicilian shore, whose hallowed earth Anchises' bones contains, and where a prince of Trojan lineage reigns?" The course resolved, before the western wind they scud amain, and make the port assigned. Meantime Acestes from a lofty stand beheld the fleet descending on the land, and not unmindful of his ancient race, down from the cliff he ran with eager pace, and held the hero in a strict embrace. Of a rough Libyan bear the spoils he wore, in either hand a painted javelin bore. His mother was a dame of Dardan blood, his sire Crinisus a Sicilian flood. He welcomes his returning friends ashore, with plenteous country cates and homely store. Now, when the following morn had chased away the flying stars, and light restored the day, Aeneas called the Trojan troops around, and thus bespoke them from a rising ground. "Offspring of heaven, divine Dardanian race, the sun revolving through the ethereal space the shining circle of the year has filled, since first this isle my father's ashes held. And now the rising day renews the year, a day forever sad, forever dear. This would I celebrate with annual games, with gifts on altars piled, and holy flames, though banished to Gaetulian barren sands, caught on the Grecian seas or hostile lands. But since this happy storm our fleet has driven, not as I deem without the will of heaven, upon these friendly shores and flowery plains, which hide Anchises and his blessed remains, let us with joy perform his honours due, and pray for prosperous winds our voyage to renew. Pray that in towns and temples of our own the name of great Anchises may be known, and yearly games may spread the gods' renown. Our sports Acestes of the Trojan race, with royal gifts ordained, is pleased to grace. 2 steers on every ship the king bestows. His gods and ours shall share your equal vows. Besides, if 9 days hence the rosy morn shall with unclouded light the skies adorn, that day with solemn sports I mean to grace. Light galleys on the sea shall run a watery race. Some shall in swiftness for the goal contend, and others try the twanging bow to bend. The strong with iron gauntlets armed shall stand opposed in combat on the yellow sand. Let all be present at the games prepared, and joyful victors wait the just reward. But now assist the rites with garlands crowned, he said, and first his brows with myrtle bound. So the book opens with the Trojans on the sea. The Trojans look back, Aeneas especially, and they see this smoke coming up out of Carthage, and they kind of know what happened to Dido. But they put their eyes forward, and the only thing that bounds them is the open sea and the open sky. But this doesn't last very long. Some foul weather comes their way, and Palinurus, the pilot of the main ship, says, this isn't looking so great. But he tells Aeneas, not even Jove could do anything about this. This seems to me like it is fate. But if I know where we're at, I think we're pretty close to Sicily. So what do you think about rowing there? I think we can make it. And Aeneas says, hey, nothing would please me more. So they scud amain. They make a beeline with all their strength, amain, to Sicily. And Acestes, the Trojan ruler there, sees them coming and comes down to greet them. And so he welcomes them with these country cates, these choice foods, and all that he has to offer. And the next day, Aeneas greets everybody and says, hey, it's been a year since we have buried my father. So I want to hold annual games every year to remember my father. And no matter where we are, whether we're back in Africa with the Gaetulians or we're with the Greeks or any hostile land, we will celebrate these games. But how much better that we get to do it here in Sicily, and hopefully we get to do it one day in our destined home. And our host, Acestes, is going to give us all these things, this food. He will bless the games. And on the 9th day, we will have our sports. We're going to have our boat race. We're going to have a foot race. We're going to have an archery contest. And we'll have a boxing contest. And then after he's done talking, he puts myrtle on himself. And he's going to start the games. Line 94. Then Helymus by his example led, and old Acestes each adorned his head. Thus young Ascanius with a sprightly grace his temples tied, and all the Trojan race. Aeneas then advanced amidst the train, by thousands followed through the flowery plain, to great Anchises' tomb, which when he found he poured to Bacchus on the hallowed ground 2 bowls of sparkling wine, of milk 2 more, and 2 from offered bowls of purple gore. With roses then the sepulchre he strode, and thus his father's ghost bespoke aloud. Hail, O ye holy mains! Hail again, paternal ashes now reviewed in vain! The gods permitted not that you, with me, should reach the promised shores of Italy, or Tiber's flood, what flood soe'er it be. Scarce had he finished, when with speckled pride a serpent from the tomb began to glide. His hugy bulk on 7 high volumes rolled. Blue was his breadth of back, but streaked with scaly gold. Thus riding on his curls, he seemed to pass a rolling fire along, and singe the grass. More various colors through his body run than Iris when her bow imbibes the sun. Betwixt the rising altars and around, the sacred monster shot along the ground. With harmless play amidst the bowls he passed, and with his lolling tongue essayed the taste. Thus fed with holy food, the wondrous guest within the hollow tomb retired to rest. The pious prince, surprised at what he viewed, the funeral honors with more zeal renewed, doubtful if this place's genius were, or guardian of his father's sepulchre. Genius would be a spirit like a genie you could think of. 5 sheep, according to the rites he slew, as many swine and steers of sable hue. New generous wine he from the goblets poured, and called his father's ghost from hell restored. The glad attendants in long order come, offering their gifts at great Anchises' tomb. Some add more oxen, some divide the spoil, some place the chargers on the grassy soil, some blow the fires, and offered entrails broil. Now came the day desired. The skies were bright with rosy luster of the rising light. The bordering people, roused by sounding fame of Trojan feasts and great Acestes' name, the crowded shore with acclamations fill, part to behold, and part to prove their skill. And first the gifts in public view they place, green laurel wreaths and palm, the victor's grace. Within the circle arms and tripods lie, ingots of gold and silver heaped on high, and vests embroidered of the Tyrian dye. The trumpet's clangor then the feast proclaims, and all prepare for their appointed games. Alright, so Aeneas is leading the way, and Helymus, it's actually his half-brother, another son of Anchises by a mortal mother. He then puts the myrtle on, and Acestes and Ascanius, and then all the Trojans, and so they all go through the flowery plain to Anchises' tomb. And Aeneas pours out 2 bowls of wine, of milk, and of bowls of gore to Bacchus, and then his father's ghost speaks out loud. Hail, yes, the gods did not permit that I would reach Italy with you. And after he's done speaking this short little speech, this multicolored serpent comes from his tomb. He starts gliding along and goes to the bowls, gets a taste. Everywhere he goes, it's like he's burning the ground. Very wondrous guest indeed. And then he goes back to the tomb. And so Aeneas isn't sure what exactly that was, whether that's the spirit of Sicily, a spirit of Anchises' grave. Not sure what to make of it. And so they keep offering all these gifts to Anchises, who will kind of become a god by the end of the book. And they put all these things, food, the chargers, which would be the platters on the grassy soil, and all of these things. And then the day comes, and all of these local Sicilians come out, some just to watch the games because they hear about the Trojan feasts and about Acestes hosting these games, and some are going to actually compete. And so they put all the gifts out, the laurels and all the prizes to be won, and then it's time to start. The trumpet sounds, and the games will begin. Line 151. 4 galleys first, with equal rowers bear, advancing in the watery lists appear. The speedy dolphin that outstrips the wind bore Menesthius, author of the Memmian kind. Gaius the vast Chimeria's bulk commands, which rising like a towering city stands. 3 Trojans tug at every laboring oar, 3 banks in 3 degrees the sailors bore. Beneath their sturdy strokes the billows roar. Sergestus, who began the Sergian race, and the great Centaur took the leading place. Cloanthus on the sea-green Scylla stood, from whom Cluentius draws his Trojan blood. Far in the sea, against the foaming shore, there stands a rock. The raging billows roar above his head in storms. But when 'tis clear, uncurl their ridgy backs, and at his foot appear. In peace below the gentle waters run. The cormorants above lie basking in the sun. On this the hero fixed an oak in sight, the mark to guide the mariners aright. To bear with this, the seamen stretch their oars, then round the rock they steer, and seek the former shores. The lots decide their place. Above the rest, each leader shining in his Tyrian vest, the common crew with wreaths of poplar boughs their temples crown, and shade their sweaty brows. Besmeared with oil, their naked shoulders shine. All take their seats, and wait the sounding sign. They grip their oars, and every panting breast is raised by turns with hope, by turns with fear depressed. The clangor of the trumpet gives the sign. At once they start, advancing in a line. With shouts the sailors rend the starry skies. Lash with their oars, the smoky billows rise. Sparkles the briny main, and the vexed ocean fries. Exact in time, with equal strokes they row. At once the brushing oars and brazen prow dash up the sandy waves, and ope the depths below. Not fiery coursers in a chariot race invade the field with half so swift a pace. Not the fierce driver with more fury lends the sounding lash, and ere the stroke descends, low to the wheels his pliant body bends. The partial crowd their hopes and fears divide, and aid with eager shouts the favourite side. Cries, murmurs, clamours, with a mixing sound from woods to woods, from hills to hills rebound. Amidst the loud applauses of the shore, Gyas outstripped the rest, and sprung before. Cloanthus better manned pursued him fast, but his o'er-masted galley checked his haste. The centaur and the dolphin brushed the brine with equal oars, advancing in a line. And now the mighty centaur seems to lead, and now the speedy dolphin gets ahead. Now board to board the rival vessels row, the billows lave the skies, and ocean groans below. They reach the mark. Proud Gyas and his train in triumph rode, the victors of the main. But steering round, he charged his pilot stand more close to shore and skim along the sand. Let others bear to sea, Menoetus heard. But secret shelves too cautiously he feared, and fearing sought the deep, and still aloof he steered. With louder cries the captain called again, "Bear to the rocky shore, and shun the main!" He spoke, and speaking at his stern he saw the bold Cloanthus near the shelving straw. Betwixt the mark and him the Scylla stood, and in a closer compass ploughed the flood. He passed the mark, and wheeling got before. Gyas blasphemed the gods, devoutly swore, cried out for anger, and his hair he tore. Mindless of others' lives, so high was grown his rising rage, and careless of his own, the trembling dotard to the deck he drew, then hoisted up, and overboard he threw. This done, he seized the helm, his fellows cheered, turned short upon the shelves, and madly steered. Hardly his head the plunging pilot rears, clogged with his clothes, encumbered with his years. Now dropping wet, he climbs the cliff with pain. The crowd that saw him fall and float again shout from the distant shore, and loudly laugh to see his heaving breast disgorge the briny draught. The following centaur and the dolphin's crew their vanished hopes of victory renew. While Gyas lags, they kindle in the race to reach the mark. Sergestus takes the place, Mnestheus pursues, and while around they wind, comes up not half his galley's length behind. Then on the deck amidst his mates appeared, and thus their drooping courage he cheered. "My friends, and Hector's followers heretofore, exert your vigour, tug the labouring oar, stretch to your strokes, my still unconquered crew, whom from the flaming walls of Troy I drew. In this our common interest let me find that strength of hand, that courage of the mind, as when you stemmed the strong Malian flood, and o'er the Syrtes' broken billows rode. I seek not now the foremost palm to gain, though yet, but that haughty wish is vain. Let those enjoy it to whom the gods ordain. But to be last, the lags of all the race? Redeem yourselves and me from that disgrace." Now one and all they tug amain. They row at the full stretch, and shake the brazen prow. The sea beneath them sinks, their labouring sides are swelled, and sweat runs guttering down in tides. Chance aids their daring with unhoped success. Sergestus, eager with his beak to press betwixt the rival galley and the rock, shuts up the unwieldy centaur in the lock. The vessel struck, and with the dreadful shock her oars she shivered, and her head she broke. The trembling rowers from their banks arise, and anxious for themselves renounce the prize. With iron poles they heave her off the shores, and gather from the sea their floating oars. The crew of Mnestheus, with elated minds, urge their success, and call the willing winds. Then ply their oars, and cut their liquid way in larger compass on the roomy sea. As when the dove her rocky hold forsakes, roused in affright, her sounding wings she shakes. The cavern rings with clattering, out she flies, and leaves her callow care, and cleaves the skies. At first she flutters, but at length she springs to smoother flight, and shoots upon her wings. So Mnestheus in the dolphin cuts the sea, and flying with the force, that force assists his way. All right, so we have the first event, this boat race. And so everyone's in their galleys. We have the dolphin. I just imagine it being announced. And the first spot, we have the dolphin. Yay! Because there's this huge crowd watching, right? So we have the dolphin, the chimera, the centaur, and the scylla, and they're all racing against each other. And so they're all waiting in anticipation. Aeneas has put an oak on this distant rock, and when the sea's rough, it's covered with water, but now it's calm, and you can see the base and everything. And the cormorants, these birds, are basking in the sun on it. So you know it's safe, and then everyone's ready. And the trumpet sounds and they all are off, and so it goes back and forth. The boats, one is ahead, another's ahead, and we finally get where Gaius he's in first place, and he wants his men to really stick to the rocks, and his pilot is scared because he doesn't want there to be something under the water that he hits, and so he keeps going wider and wider, further away from the rock, and Gaius is saying, "What are you doing? Stop!" as these other boats are kind of cutting in. And so Gaius is infuriated, and so he goes and he grabs his pilot and throws him overboard. And the pilot, he's drowning almost, and he finally puts his head above the water, and he's swimming. All of the men, of course, on the boat are laughing because their buddy just got thrown overboard, and the pilot swims to the rock. He's safe, and everyone on the shore is laughing, and it's still going. But because Gaius's boat had been further away from the rock, there was this opportunity, this opening, and so the other boats took advantage, and they went through, and Menesthius ends up in last place here, and he says, "Come on, men, row with all your might." He's encouraging his men, and he says, "We've been through so much together. I rescued you from Troy. We've been through much harder rowing than this, so come on, row." And he especially doesn't want to get last place, right? It doesn't matter if he doesn't get first. They're so far behind that it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anyway. But we can't get last. And so row with all your might, and they do. They pull harder, and their chance comes when Sergestus, who is the captain of the Centaur, ends up hitting the rock, and so they stop caring about the race. They just don't want to drown, and so they very carefully, the rowers of the Centaur, just try to push off of the rock and not drown. They get their oars, and so Menesthius' crew, they're elated. They want to catch up, and they are like this bird that is afraid because a predator has come, and at first she's kind of timid and trying to figure out what to do, but then she ends up smoothly flying in the sky. And that is exactly what Menesthius and the dolphin is doing. They started out rough, but now they're sailing smoothly. So let's pick it up, 284. Sergestus and the centaur soon he passed, wedged in the rocky shoals and sticking fast. In vain the victor he with cries implores, and practices to row with shattered oars. Then Menesthius bears with Gaius and outflies. The ship without a pilot yields the prize. Unvanquished still and now alone remains. Her he pursues, and all his vigor strains. Shouts from the favoring multitude arise. Applauding echo to the shouts replies. Shouts, wishes, and applause run rattling through the skies. These clamors with disdain the Scylla heard. Much grudge the praise, but more the robbed reward. Resolved to hold their own, they mend their pace, all obstinate to die or gain the race. Raised with success, the dolphin swiftly ran, for they can conquer who believe they can. Both urged their oars, and fortune both supplies, and both perhaps had shared an equal prize, when to the seas Cloanthus holds his hands, and succor from the watery powers demands. "Gods of the liquid realms on which I row, if given by you the laurel bound my brow, assist to make me guilty of my vow. A snow-white bull shall on your shore be slain, his offered entrails cast unto the main, and ruddy wine from golden goblets thrown, your grateful gift and my return shall own." The choir of nymphs and Phorcys from below, with virgin Panopea, heard his vow, and old Portunus, with his breadth of hand, pushed on, and sped the galley to the land. Swift as a shaft, o'er winged wind she flies, and darting to the port, obtains the prize. The herald summons all, and then proclaims Cloanthus conqueror of the naval games. The prince with laurel crowns the victor's head, and 3 fat steers are to his vessel led, the ship's reward, with generous wine beside, and sums of silver which the crew divide. The leaders are distinguished from the rest, the victor honored with a nobler vest, where gold and purple strive in equal rows, and needlework its happy cost bestows. There Ganymede is wrought with living art, chasing through Ida's groves the trembling hart. Breathless he seems, yet eager to pursue, when from aloft descends in open view the bird of Jove, and sousing on his prey, with crooked talons bears the boy away. In vain, with lifted hands and gazing eyes, his guards behold him soaring through the skies, and dogs pursue his flight with imitated cries. Mnestheus, the second victor, was declared, and summoned there the second prize he shared. A coat of mail, which brave Demoleus bore, more brave Aeneas from his shoulders tore, in single combat on the Trojan shore. This was ordained for Mnestheus to possess, in war for his defence, for ornament in peace. Rich was the gift, and glorious to behold, but yet so ponderous with its plates of gold that scarce 2 servants could the weight sustain. Yet, loaded thus, Demoleus o'er the plain pursued and lightly seized the Trojan train. The third, succeeding to the last reward, 2 goodly bowls of massy silver shared, with figures prominent and richly wrought, and 2 brass cauldrons from Dodonia brought. Thus all, rewarded by the hero's hands, their conquering temples bound with purple bands. And now Sergestus, clearing from the rock, brought back his galley shattered with the shock. Forlorn she looked, without an aiding oar, and houted by the vulgar made to shore. As when a snake, surprised upon the road, is crushed athwart her body by the load of heavy wheels, or with a mortal wound her belly bruised and trodden to the ground. In vain with loosened curls she crawls along, yet fierce above she brandishes her tongue, glares with her eyes, and bristles with her scales, but grovelling in the dust her parts unsound she trails. So slowly to the port the centaur tends, but what she wants in oars with sails amends. Yet for his galley saved, the grateful prince is pleased the unhappy chief to recompense. Pholoa, the Cretan slave, rewards his care, beauteous herself, with lovely twins as fair. Alright, so the end of the galley race. We have these ships kind of going head to head. The centaur is crashed on the rocks. Gaius has thrown his pilot overboard in his anger, and they actually don't fare so well without a pilot who knows what he's doing. So it's really between Mnestheus and the dolphin and Cloanthus in Scylla. And they are just about even. They might have even tied, but Cloanthus prays to the gods of the sea and says, "If you help me win, a snow-white bull I will slay in offering to you. I will give you all these gifts." And so these sea gods and nymphs hear his prayer and speed his ship to victory. And so they all get their prizes. So the first prize is this noble vest, and it's beautiful, it's ornate, its art portrays Ganymede being stolen by Jove. Remember, Ganymede is Jove's cupbearer, and Jove stole him, and all of Ganymede's guards and dogs are watching him being taken away. The second victor, Mnestheus, gets this super heavy, this ponderous coat of mail that Aeneas took from Demoleus, and he gets that. And then the third place gets these nice silver bowls. And, Aeneas is a kind prince. And when Sergestus comes back with his centaur, it's in pretty rough shape, like a snake that still has some venom, still shows some pride, but it's definitely dying. That's the centaur. And the vulgar, these crude people, these jerks, are shouting at Sergestus for his failure. But Aeneas honors him with this beautiful Cretan slave woman who has these 2 beautiful twins. And that ends the galley race. So now we're going to head to the mountains in this valley to have the foot race. Line 373. From thence his way the Trojan hero bent into the neighboring plain, with mountains pent, whose sides were shaded with surrounding wood. Full in the midst of this fair valley stood a native theatre, which, rising slow by just degrees, o'erlooked the ground below. High on his sylvan throne the leader sate. A numerous train attend in solemn state. Here those that in the rapid course delight, desire of honour and the prize invite. The rival runners without order stand, the Trojans mix with the Sicilian band. First Nisus with Euryalus appears, Euryalus a boy of blooming years, with a sprightly grace and equal beauty crowned. Nisus for friendship to the youth renowned. Diores next of Priam's royal race, then Salius joined with Patron took their place. But Patron in Arcadia had his birth, and Salius his from Acarnanian earth. Then two Sicilian youths, the names of these swift Helymus and lovely Panopes, both jolly huntsmen, both in forest bred, and owning old Acestes for their head, with several others of ignobler name, whom time has not delivered o'er to fame. To these the hero thus his thoughts explained, in words when general approbation gained. One common largesse is for all designed, the vanquished and the victor shall be joined. 2 darts of polished steel and Gnossian wood, a silver-studded axe alike bestowed. The foremost 3 have olive wreaths decreed. The first of these obtains a stately steed adorned with trappings, and the next in fame the quiver of an Amazonian dame, with feathered Thracian arrows well supplied. A golden belt shall gird his manly side, which with a sparkling diamond shall be tied. The third this Grecian helmet shall contend. He said. To their appointed base they went, with beating hearts the expected sign receive, and starting all at once the barrier leave. Spread out as on the winged winds they flew, and seized the distant goal with greedy view. Shot from the crowd, swift Nisus all o'erpassed, nor storms nor thunder equal half his haste. The next, but though the next, yet far disjoined, came Salius, and Euryalus behind. Then Helymus, whom young Diores plied, step after step and almost side by side, his shoulders pressing, and in longer space had won, or left at least a dubious race. Now spent, the goal they almost reach at last, when eager Nisus, hapless in his haste, slipped first, and slipping fell upon the plain, soaked with the blood of oxen newly slain. The careless victor had not marked his way, but treading where the treacherous puddle lay, his heels flew up, and on the grassy floor he fell, besmeared with filth and holy gore. Not mindless then, Euryalus, of thee, nor of the sacred bonds of amity, he strove the immediate rival's hope to cross, and caught the foot of Salius as he rose. So Salius lay extended on the plain. Euryalus springs out, the prize to gain, and leaves the crowd. Applauding peals attend the victor to the goal, who vanquished by his friend. Next Helymus, and then Diores came, by 2 misfortunes made the third in fame. But Salius enters, and exclaiming loud for justice, deafens and disturbs the crowd, urges his cause may in the court be heard, and pleads the prize as wrongfully conferred. But favor for Euryalus appears, his blooming beauty with his tender years had bribed the judges for the promised prize. Besides, Diores fills the court with cries, who vainly reaches at the last reward, if the first palm on Salius be conferred. Then thus the prince, let no disputes arise. Where fortune placed it, I award the prize. But fortune's error give me leave to mend, at least to pity my deserving friend. He said, and from among the spoils he draws, ponderous with shaggy mane and golden paws, a lion's hide. To Salius this he gives. Nisus with envy sees the gift and grieves. If such rewards to vanquished men are due, he said, and falling is to rise by you, what prize may Nisus from your bounty claim, who merited the first rewards and fame? In falling both an equal fortune tried, would fortune for my fall so well provide? With this he pointed to his face, and showed his hand and all his habit smeared with blood. The indulgent father of the people smiled, and caused to be produced an ample shield of wondrous art, by Didymaean wrought, long since from Neptune's bars in triumph brought. This given to Nisus, he divided the rest, and equal justice in his gifts expressed. Okay, so at the beginning of this section, they make their way into the mountain valley, and everybody lines up to race, and we have prominently these 2 great friends, Nisus and Euryalus. they hear that they're all going to get gifts. The gifts are listed off, and then they start. And so far beyond the rest is Nisus as he just sprints past them all. He is far in the lead and followed by Salius and then Euryalus. And so Nisus doesn't see all this blood that's in the dirt and dust. And so he's almost to the finish line when he slips and falls because of that blood, meaning that Salius is going to come in first. However, since Nisus and Euryalus are such good friends, when Salius passes, rather than letting him go, Nisus grabs him and makes him fall as well, so that Euryalus is in first place. And so Helymus and then Diorus are next, and Salius is the only one that has an issue with this, of course, because he was going to get first, and he was robbed out of it. And everybody favored Euryalus for winning, and Aeneas says much the same. You know what? Fortune said that Euryalus should have won, so I'm not going to take this from him. But, Salius, since you perform so well, here's this magnificent lion's hide. And then, of course, Nisus, who was in front, is like, whoa, okay, so he fell because I tripped him, and he gets rewarded. What's going to happen? I was way in front. I obviously should have won. And, Aeneas, being the kind-hearted leader that he is, the indulgent father, as it says in 470, gives him this beautiful, ample shield with wondrous art. Next, we're going to have the boxing match. So, 476. The race thus ended, and rewards bestowed, once more the prince bespeaks the attentive crowd. If there be here whose dauntless courage dare in gauntlet fight, with limbs and body bare, his opposite sustain in open view, stand forth the champion, and the games renew. 2 prizes I propose, and thus divide. A bull with gilded horns and fillets tied shall be the portion of the conquering chief. A sword and helm shall cheer the loser's grief. Then haughty Dares in the lists appears. Stalking he strides, his head erected bears. His nervous arms the weighty gauntlet wields, and loud applauses echo through the field. Dares alone in combat used to stand the match of mighty Paris hand to hand. The same at Hector's funerals undertook gigantic beauties of the Emetian stock, and by the stroke of his resistless hand stretched the vast bulk upon the yellow sand. Such Dares was, and such he strode along, and drew the wonder of the gazing throng. His brawny back and ample breast he shows, his lifted arms around his head he throws, and deals in whistling air his empty blows. His match is sought, but through the trembling band not one dares answer to the proud demand. Presuming of his force with sparkling eyes, already he devours the promised prize. He claims the bull with awless insolence, and having seized his horns, accosts the prince. If none my matchless valor dares oppose, how long shall Dares wait his dastard foes? Permit me, chief, permit without delay, to lead this uncontested gift away. The crowd assents, and with redoubled cries for the proud challenger demands the prize. Acestes, fired with just disdain, to see the palm usurped without a victory, reproached Entellus thus, who sate beside, and heard and saw, unmoved, the Trojans' pride. Once, but in vain, a champion of renown, so tamely can you bear the ravished crown, a prize in triumph borne before your sight, and shun for fear the danger of the fight? Where is our Eryx now, the boasted name, the god who taught your thundering arm the game? Where now your baffled honor? Where the spoil that filled your house and fame that filled our isle? Entellus thus, my soul is still the same, unmoved with fear and moved with martial fame, but my chill blood is curdled in my vein, and scarce the shadow of a man remains. Oh, could I turn to that fair prime again, that prime of which this boaster is so vain, the brave, who this decrepit age defies, should feel my force without the promised prize. He said, and rising at the word, he threw 2 ponderous gauntlets down in open view. Gauntlets which Eryx wont in fight to wield and sheath his hands within the listed field. With fear and wonder seized, the crowd beholds the gloves of death, with 7 distinguished folds of tough bull hides. The space within is spread with iron or with loads of heavy lead. Darius himself was daunted at the sight, renounced his challenge, and refused to fight. Astonished at their weight, the hero stands and poised the ponderous engines in his hands. What had your wonder, said Entellus, been, had you the gauntlets of Alcides seen, or viewed this stern debate on this unhappy green? These which I bear your brother Eryx wore, still marked with battered brains and mingled gore. With these he long sustained the Herculean arm, and these I wielded while my blood was warm, this languished frame while better spirits fed, ere age unstrung my nerves, or time o'ersnowed my head. But if the challenger these arms refuse, and cannot wield their weight, or dare not use, if great Aeneas and Acestes join in his request, these gauntlets I resign. Let us with equal arms perform the fight, and let him leave to fear, since I resign my right. All right, so we have the boxing match, and this peacock kind of guy, Darius, comes out. He's big, he's strong, he's intimidating everyone. Nobody wants to fight him, and so he just goes up and pretty much takes the gold medal, would be the equivalent, right? Hey, Aeneas, I don't think anybody's brave enough to fight me, man enough to fight me, so can I just take this now? And everybody's okay with it, except for Acestes. Acestes is a Trojan, but he's a Sicilian as well now, right? And so he goes up to his friend Entellus and says, are you really going to let this guy say all this stuff? Why aren't you fighting him? Eryx, your old friend, he was plenty strong, and you boxed with him. You're a good fighter. Why would you not? And Entellus says, I'm old. Plain and simple, I'm old, and I don't have it in me as much anymore. But, of course, he still does. And so he throws these heavy-duty gloves into the ring, and they're 7 layers thick, and they have iron and lead studs, spikes wrapped in them. And Darius sees this and he says, oh, I'm not fighting with that. And Entellus says, man, are you really afraid of these? You should have seen Alcides, which would be another name for Hercules. Man, what would your reaction to his be? You know, your brother Eryx used these, and he's considered a god now as well. But if you don't want to fight with them, then I won't fight with them. If Aeneas and Acestes say the same thing, then fine, let's just fight bare-fisted, and we'll see who wins then, kid. All right, so the older man is tired of this young man's boasting, and they're going to go head-to-head without these gauntlets.